Good evening, Cedar Falls. Welcome to our work session tonight, which is a continuation of the public safety model discussion. As we brief always for the start of a public safety work session, or start of a work session, these are informal discussions between council members and myself. We ask questions to staff. Sometimes they provide presentations. Tonight, we are going to be continuing our talk about public safety, and we did have a presentation last or 2 weeks ago in the work session. So this time it's primarily geared toward council discussion. We had a couple of items from last time around that we wanted to discuss for sure tonight, which was the public safety director position and what the plans are for that, advertising externally, internally. At the end of the last meeting, we had a consensus discussion, and the consensus was at the time to move ahead with status quo in the public safety model without any immediate changes, and then to potentially revisit it in 6 months, but in the meantime not allowing discussion of additional changes before then. There was a consensus of 4 votes at that time. Since that time, my understanding was there might be a break in that consensus. So before we would be able to have any further discussion on that, we would need to clarify that consensus. So to start the meeting and to guide what we're going to talk about a bit tonight, I'll bring up that consensus question again, exactly as before. Is there a consensus to move ahead with status quo without any immediate changes, to revisit in 6 months, and to not have a discussion of additional changes before then? Is there a discussion, or excuse me, is there a consensus to move ahead with status quo? Let's see, 1,
Yes.
2, 3, and
So my points of discussion have to do with the PS 22 that we talked about during the campaign, and I wanted to address some things that I've talked to citizens and still have concerns about. In 6 months, it's a continuous improvement process of the overall city, right? It isn't just the police and fire, it's the street, it's the sanitation, etc. So I would like to look at these points that we talked about during the campaign and make sure that we address those, and then take a consensus vote based on that.
okay. So that's been brought forward as something to discuss tonight. Would there be a consensus to have that discussion this evening? Sure. Seeing 3 from Councilor Sires.
Yes, I think we should go back to separate police and fire. So I'm up for the discussion, yes.
Okay, so you're open for discussion?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So we will open for just discussion of those topics. I'm going to leave it primarily in the council's hands tonight for how you want to direct the conversation. We do want to keep in mind we have a meeting that starts at 6:30. We'll want to wrap up here at 6:25 so that we can reset for that meeting. So we may not be able to cover everything tonight, but certainly want to keep that conversation moving forward. So Councilor or Gil, first names in work sessions. So Gil, what's your thought here?
So I'd like to kind of go down the list, and the first one that we wanted to get to at the last work session is the position for Mr. Olson's vacancy, so we can make sure tonight to get that one nailed down. So maybe go in reverse order if we can address that one first.
Before we go too far, can I ask a question? I
Yes,
guess
please.
of the leadership of public safety is this document that Gil's referring to, the PS 22, was this campaign literature, or was this something put together by our public safety leadership? Did you have input in it? Were these your ideas?
We did not have any input in this proposal or this idea.
So looking at this as a start, the idea of reprogramming public safety director as a supplemental duty, this is how the position was prior to 2020. My understanding was it was two years or 3 years in that kind of field. Is that correct, Dr. Olson? That you served as both the police chief and the public safety director?
Yes, I don't know the exact number of years, but I served as the public safety director and the police chief, but at that time I did have an assistant police chief to assist me. And then when I got moved to the director-only position, then the assistant chief moved up to the chief's position.
So did the assistant police chief position just disappear then, or was that absorbed into the captain levels and they took over some of those responsibilities? What happened there?
Well, yeah, I guess maybe one way to look at it is the assistant chief position became the chief's position, but we did not add an assistant chief behind that.
Okay, so I guess it was Chief Birdie, or then
Yes.
Assistant Chief Birdie at the time. Was he acting functionally as the police chief
Yes,
at that point?
yes.
And like all but title then?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
I have a question about that. Do we have some numbers possibly? So I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that since we had assistant chiefs, that they had a pay grade, and then the chiefs had a pay grade, correct? So there were assistants on both sides prior, or just assistant on the police side?
Well, I can just jump in the history. It'll only take me a minute. So in the years past, we would have a chief on the police side, a chief on the fire side, and then you'd either have an assistant chief or you had a captain that served in that assistant chief position. Then as we moved into the public safety model, we got rid of those assistant chiefs or those captain and battalion chief positions that served as the assistant. So you could say we went from 2 chiefs and 2 assistants to 1 director and 2 chiefs.
Yeah, and that's what I thought. And so I guess my question is, ultimately, is if we look at the money, is it kind of wash out to have a director and 2 chiefs, or is there any savings to having 2 chiefs and 2 assistants? You see what I mean? I don't know. Has anyone done that cost analysis? I'd be curious to see those numbers.
Yeah, there's less administrative costs, I think, if you have a director and 2 chiefs, because you have 3 positions instead of the 4. Now, that doesn't mean we reduced the public safety staff by 1, because we hired 1, at the lowest level.
Okay.
So we were able to put, you could say, 1 more on the street or 1 more in the fire station.
Is there a way to maybe dig up some of those older numbers sometime, Jen, and shoot them out and see? I would also agree that it probably is cheaper to have director and 2 chiefs, but I'd still like to see the numbers. Efficiency is always great, as well as looking at cost savings and making sure that we're balancing the 2. So
It's not just the salary, but it would be benefits too. It's the whole package of additional employees.
oh yeah, of course. I'm not just talking about salaries. I'm talking about the actual cost.
In your position, Jeff, you weren't the first director, were you? I was thinking that there was 3 or 4 prior to you.
Yeah, so we've had, I'm just going to take a guess, maybe 1986 or 7 or 8, somewhere along that time frame, we had a public safety director, and then you had your police chief and your fire chief in the 2 separate departments, similar to what we have now. And then at some point in time, we didn't have a director, and then we had a director come back again and serve the same role. We went a little bit further then because we had some assistant directors, or as we call them, deputy directors, that kind of served both a police and fire capacity from an administrative level. So no, this is not the first director position we've had.
Hey, may I piggyback on Councilwoman DeBurr's question? So, again, I think we answered that Chief Olson, Director Olson, Chief Birdie, and Chief Bostwick were not involved in the creation of PS 22, correct? Okay, and Administrator Gaines, were you involved in the creation of PS 22? Okay, so my question is, who was involved in what are their qualifications as far as expertise in public safety?
Sure. I created it. I took input, if I can put Councilor Harding on the spot, a lot of discussion about what would make us feel more comfortable with the model, bringing it forward as a proposal. I certainly don't purport that I'm an expert in the field, but I'm here for original thinking. And so I'm bringing these to you as ideas. suggestions as things I would like to see council discuss, but ultimately it's up to the council to decide.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Well, this, I'm going to read this number 5, which is the one that you're talking about, not making it a full-time position, and then the mayor every year assigning either the police chief or the fire chief to the position.
Yeah, that one I'm willing to pull back on, because I could see if the assumption is it's going to swap back and forth in this proposal. I don't think that's not what I was going for. I just wanted to ensure in this that there wasn't a perception that the fire chief could never be, that there was only one person that could possibly be assigned to it. But it would depend on the expertise, the capability levels, and I would be fine if this went through, if it were several years assigned, or maybe it's just an indefinite assignment, so that they're, I think that's how it was with Director Olson, was an indefinite assignment in that position.
Well, Director Olson, without having an assistant, wouldn't this create chain of command issues?
Well, I will tell you, when I became the director and retained the police chief position, my contact with the police lessened significantly. And so I felt like I lost some of the direct contacts, and felt that we need, you really need somebody below the director to kind of work more directly, with a lot of your supervisors and your officers, or a fire chief with your command level and your firefighters, because I became more distant. I became less, maybe, I don't want to say less aware of what was going on, but not as aware as I was, because I wasn't there working with them as closely as I was in the past. And I really think, that is critical. When you look at the culture of an organization, you don't want things to slip away. You still want to make sure that you have that ability to really monitor and help. And we talk department-wide about mentoring, how important that is. So there's a lot to it. And I think it's, if you do have a dual role, if you have a director that's also a chief, they, in my opinion, absolutely need an assistant chief to help.
And so with you've done this, is it your opinion that what we're doing now with the position hierarchy that we have is the best for the model?
In my opinion, it is, yeah.
And Jen, did you put together any numbers as far as if there was an assistant with the salary and benefits as to how that compares? Probably would need one on the fire side too. I'm assuming you'd want a police assistant and a fire assistant to the chief.
Not necessarily with benefits, but I know from a salary perspective, I think Mr. Cruz and I had that conversation. He had asked kind of the similar question too, and I think I had let him know that if we're talking about a director position at $170,000, 2 chiefs at, 135, or whatever that is, and an entry level, that's still probably going to be cheaper than 2 chiefs to assistant chiefs from a salary perspective. I'm just saying that from a benefits, if they all have family health insurance and you have 4 of them, it's the same, but obviously the retirement costs, if you have higher salaries, retirement costs would be higher. So those were just kind of some round numbers that we talked about, but not actual, this is what it is, and I think what's tough right now is we can go back and look to see what actual numbers are, but keeping in mind moving forward, you also have to kind of understand what are we going to be able to hire the people at now, too.
So I guess that kind of my question is really if it's kind of cheaper to do it the way we are doing it now, and it works better the way we're doing it now, why would we want to change this to a part-time position? Or not even a part-time position, but a not full-time position as the way it's listed.
A split position.
Split decision, yeah.
Director Olson, could you talk a bit, and maybe Chief Birdie can also, talk about how succession planning works now for the police chief position, where earlier if you had an assistant police chief, that would be sort of the supposed successor, being trained to become a police chief. How does that work now when you don't have that single person as an assistant?
Well,
Either one's fine.
Well, I would say, just to tell you a little bit about the operation. So, as Director Olson said, both Chief Boswick and myself work on the operational level of the department. So day to day, Chief Boswick and I are working. I'm working with the captains on the police shifts, a lieutenant running the detective unit. He's working with the captains and lieutenants on the fire shifts. So we're very operational because there's nobody below us, besides those captains and lieutenants. There's no one in the middle. And as far as mentoring for chief's position, we encourage our captains to attend the command schools, either the National Fire Academy or the FBI Academy or Southern Police Institute. So the majority of our captains have attended those schools already. We have lieutenants on our department with 15, 16 years of supervision. So we have plenty of people well-groomed to be chiefs, at our department or departments smaller than us or even larger than us. So mentoring and getting people ready to be chiefs is not a problem.
So we're not to point 4 yet, but that's kind of part of point 4 in these talking points. However you created them, these are things that have came up when my discussions with citizens have been about. So that kind of is in that line. So how are we going to promote and educate and develop leadership within a single lane or a dual lane role for police and fire?
Well, that's an area we've done very well at for, a long time. Our captains have always attended the FBI Academy or command level school. Just last week, we had 5 employees who spent a whole week at leadership training, FBI leadership training down in Cedar Rapids. So we're sitting good for people to move up, from lieutenant to captain and captain to chief. Absolutely. And we're getting to be a very senior department. So
I'll stay off of point 4 first, or for a second, and go back to 5. So, Ron, if we were to post this, or however it turns out, if you were to post it, what would be the salary? Would it be this 170, or what's the starting salary that you're anticipating for this position?
So I would actually have to look in what the pay range is, and typically we like to hire somewhere below the midpoint, but it also depends on what the experience level is of the person coming in. So
Maybe it would be helpful if you explain the pay band that we put together, a few years ago on how that works.
Sure. So we had, if you recall, we did a pay plan study that went throughout the entire city, and we looked at different positions and what they looked at, and that we were fortunate enough to look at the private sector, what's comparable with other public sectors, and all the way across the state and actually the Midwest. And so you look at what are other public safety directors being paid, what are other police chiefs, what are other police captains being paid, and so we tried to fit that range the best we could. So we think we have a pretty good range and pretty good ability to hire folks within there, but we also know that our department, just like almost any department's not identical. Our captains may do a little bit more than a captain somewhere else. Our lieutenants may do a little bit more than elsewhere. We don't have a sergeant's position, for instance. So there's a number of those things that that you have to take into a grain of salt. But the consultants came up with what we think is a very good pay band. And so I think we'll be looking to hire somebody within the mid-range of that pay band, depending on experience, years experience.
So I won't ask if this 170, or I will ask, is this the high end
I don't.
or pretty close?
I don't know where the.
I would say it's probably just a little above midpoint right now. In other words, I wouldn't say it's the top of the pay grade, but I would say it's above the midpoint.
Okay.
Question I'd have, can someone elaborate on how our upper management in the PSO program would compare to other cities of comparable size? And are we lean and mean, or, it feels like and seems like we are efficient, and the director has efficiency built into it to cover both departments, but could you elaborate on how we compare to other cities?
Well, it's been a few years since we looked at different departments and visited different departments that were public safety related. But I would say in general, I think the city as a whole, but as well the public safety department is leaner than most departments of comparable cities or comparable size.
Can I just jump in and talk a little bit about, we've been talking about the director's position, and we essentially in our departments have what I'll call like a pyramid type system, where you're looking at, you have one person at the top, and as we go down and you want to have more and more, so you get to the actual people that are doing the work, we have saved most of our budget for that. One of the things is it's not just in public safety. So as Director Olson had mentioned, where sometimes he gets a little bit, where he was getting a little bit removed as being both the chief and the director. Well, part of that is because if you look at the entire pyramid where you have the mayor, city administrator, and then department directors, the part that we're not taking in there is the department directors in a lot of ways act as, I'm going to do quote unquote deputy city managers or deputy city administrators in what would be, if you look at other models across the state of Iowa, they'll typically have an assistant city administrator, assistant, and the reason we don't have that is because the department directors take on a lot of that role in some of their duties, like risk management or, our vehicle replacement system. There's a number of other committees that they're always sitting on, hiring committees, those type of things that take them away from not only managing their departments, but it's also that other function, and it's hard to quantify that with regard to dollars and cents.
It's work session.
Oh yeah, that's right. Been tired today. So it's almost already 6 o'clock. Well, 9 till. My son would say that's not close. And we went from this consensus last time that we thought we had to now we're going to vote on, well, not vote, have a consensus on PS 22 and all this stuff. And again, it just seems like while there are a lot of great points in PS 22, I did see it. A lot of things seem to make sense to me. I like a lot of them. We're jumping right to this consensus to go forward with something again, and we still have not had what I would want, which is a third party or a consultant to just come in, check it out, look at what we're doing, talk about it, look at PS 22, look at where we're currently at, assess it, and then we can make some decisions based off of that. It always seems like we jump to let's make this decision. Ron said the word earlier, consultant. At the moment, I think I've said this the whole time. I've been saying this since February of 2020. I don't understand why we can't have a consultant, and really that's one of the ways with my work session referral of ways to gather metrics and data that I really wanted to talk about was trying to find someone, and I believe Mayor Green mentioned last time that he had even found some parties that will come in and look at metrics and look at things. We have some good metrics. I really did appreciate the presentation last time. I think the department's grown in strides. It does get a little political to sit here and be like, oh, we're going to talk about this now, which I understand. It is politics. But it's hard for me as a council member to just make a decision as a non-expert in something without weighing more data. And I have data from 2 experts, and I just want to get another set of data, compare it, and then make a decision and see if what we have could be fabulous. I'm not saying it's not. It might be. Are there tweaks in PS 22 that are great, that could make the city stronger? I don't want to do things to make people feel better and not make any positive changes. I want to actually dig into this stuff and look at it. So I want to see. No, you don't want to do it? That's okay. want to see, I guess, we're not going to make it through PS 22 tonight, and then we're going to drag this on, and we're going to drag this on. I just want to see, can we get a consensus to possibly get a third party in here and look at it, get some information, and then see, is there merit to PS 22? I think there is. Maybe there's not. I'm not the expert. So anyway, that's really what I want to do. I want to get some sort of consultant in here, look at where we're at, tell us the good, tell us the bad, if there is any, look at other things and say, here's your options or nothing. You guys are doing great. And then we move forward together.
To that point, we've mentioned in the past, we have the ISO that's got about 14 or 16 different components that looks at everything from top to bottom. And in what I've seen here, the public safety director position is the next component that wasn't finished from the last discussion. The PS 22 has 4 out of the 5 that are left to elaborate on. We're doing one of them right now. The other 3, looking at those, they're a union collective bargaining issue, and that, a big part of that. So I think, for my sake, I'm comfortable with the efficiencies and the accountability that we have with the current structure of the public safety director. We decided to go ahead another 6 months. We're always evaluating along the way. So we can have somebody come in if we find somebody suited to evaluate or worthy or whatever terminology you want to use. We can do that. The ISO rating schedule, I think, is coming up within a year, if not less.
And I get that.
So
Those metrics are good. I'm glad we have a good ISO rating. But
So I guess if you want to keep hiring a consultant or somebody to evaluate until they give you the results you want to hear, or are you just,
no, there's no results that I magically want to hear.
Okay.
I just want, I think the issue is deeper than the ISO rating. It's deeper than whether or not we're fundamentally safe. Obviously, we are fundamentally safe. Otherwise, you would have a mass exodus from Cedar Falls. The issue goes beyond that, and it goes to, what is government doing for me? Is there a trust? There's been and I'm not saying it's right or wrong or vilified or not. It's there, though. And so I want to, and again, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm okay with that. I want to try to break down that wall and regain the trust and bring the public back over. And maybe that's naive of me. Maybe I'm young. Maybe I don't know. But I think we owe it to the citizens to look at restoring that trust. And one way we can do that is to bring someone in. And you know what? If it's not about bringing someone that says this program is bad, this program is good. I'll be the first to say that over the last 2 years, I've learned a lot about the program, and I think there are some great things. I'm not ready to nuke it and go.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
We sat down tonight to talk about the director position and public safety discussion and this PS 22, but I can't find in this document of the 4 items where you're talking about an independent review. I don't see that as any of these 4 categories.
Well,
So
I
now
made
you're throwing in another thing that wasn't on the agenda.
I never got my referral, so I'm whether or not I'm going to say this because I was the one who made the original referral, and I still haven't even got to talk about what I wanted to talk about. So if you want me to wait and make another referral, sure, I'll wait and make another referral.
I thought you might want to just stick to what's on the agenda that we're trying to discuss here tonight.
It just says continuation of public safety model discussion. It's fairly open.
So again, political. I'm done with being political about it. I want to get to the root, and I want to try to heal, and I want to try to push forward. And I think a lot of people would appreciate that study. If you don't want to do that study, that's okay. Just say no. I'm just bringing it up to put it out there.
Well, I would ask then, for this discussion about the public safety director position, because of the time frame, we do need to kind of have some sort of a direction for staff on that. So is that something that can wait?
That makes sense. I mean, to Ron's point, like, how are we going to advertise for a position where we don't even have a unified council on what we're doing moving forward? So I would be okay with having an interim chief or interim director and then if we could get a study and then move forward. And then we have a split council on this. If we can unify council and get a stronger council behind this with, or a study and tweak things and get the citizens feeling more positive and get a unified council, then we can go out and we can advertise.
Just a question. We do
yeah.
have on the schedule that we're going to be doing that employee survey. Do you think that some of the remarks or outcome from that would help with what you're trying to figure?
I do. I think that would be fantastic. I think it would be great to include.
So why would we need two? Why would we need
Well,
to do
because-
that and also this other item? Because you're assuming there's problems, and I guess I'd like to hear from management, or do we have problems in our department? How are things going?
I guess we had an item before our last meeting, the number of grievances or lack thereof, which I believe you said there is none.
I could take that question if you'd like, both of those questions if you'd like. So previously, before they got rid of the firefighter classification that the council voted on, we had 40 grievances that had been filed on us over quite a short period of time. This past several years, or 2 years, I guess, since we've done this, almost 2 years, we haven't had a grievance at all. And then as far as seeing if people are getting along and working together and how the program's working together, I wish you guys would have been down there today. We had police and fire training at the same time going throughout the building, and some of the people that you see over here in the audience were there. We had defensive tactics going. We had fire training in a classroom. We had fire training where they were doing what we call a consumption drill. And everyone was working together and ensuring that everybody was successful throughout this whole thing. So I feel like what you're going to find from an employee survey is an incredibly high value to what's going on. And I think as far as healing, I think you're going to find that the less discussions that we have about this is going to help our department get better, and I think it's going to also help the community heal a little bit too. I'm not hearing it as the fire chief when I'm in my neighborhood, when I'm out in the public, when I'm at Walmart, when I'm at, getting my hair cut or any of that type of stuff. I'm not hearing about public safety like we did a couple of years ago. So I think that there's a lot less discussion than we're really hearing. So I'm sorry if I took
Chief
too much
Bostwick,
time.
just to confirm or to clarify on the grievance question, are you having no issues at all, or are they just being resolved before they get to a grievance?
I don't think that we've had anything that even rose to the level of any type of a grievance. Any types of problems we've resolved very quickly with a quick discussion with union, the Teamsters Union and management. It's
Okay, I just want to clarify.
been very working very well together. So
Okay, so there are issues, like every organization has issues, but they're just solved lowest level. That's what I'm gathering.
I'll let Craig take that.
I would say too, we have a labor management committee that meets, and that group evolves as people are getting promoted and move from, line employee to management. I would tell you, sick leave is down, overtime is down, people are gaining certifications, doing the work, trying to improve the organization. So the working environment is very good. It's not perfect. We have things we have to work through. Probably our biggest concern is the external threat, coming from the political process. People wondering, should they be testing at a different fire department? Should they go to a different police department? Are there places that they'd be more secure? So our biggest threat now is an external threat, and it'll carry over to, if you have a police chief opening or you have a director opening, it'll show on the applications and things too.
What policies are in place now regarding like speaking out against public safety issues? Do you have a prohibition on officers going to council members or going to social media?
Absolutely not. There are things they can't speak about regarding department business on social media, and so we would deal with that if we had a problem, but we've never had a problem. The employees are extremely accessible to all of you. We encourage you all to come down and ride or visit, and you don't have to go through the administration to do that. I guess to ride you do, but you can stop down anytime, and we've had several council people take advantage of that, so.
Okay. Now, we do have the policy for, I think it's a council policy that employees can't come and speak in, I think, public forum or other areas, because they have a process in place to deal with grievances.
Yep.
But to my knowledge, that doesn't apply at, just as a conversation at a McDonald's or something like that.
No. And people could go on social media and say a lot of things as long as they're not representing the department or wearing the uniform or purporting to be, this is what management says,
Sure.
or things like that.
But that's not just public safety, that's all departments within the city. I mean, that's nothing different for them.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, could I have the floor for a minute? I've been asking Director Olson this for a while. How many days do you have left?
3 days.
Thanks for all those years of service.
Thank you.
I only have a couple quick questions for you. When I went back to, I remembered it as the early 80s. I couldn't believe it was 40 years ago. And we had paid on call. And Mayor Cruz got reelected, must have been for about the fourth time, to get rid of paid on call, which was a lot like this PS 22. That's just a little bit of history. Does not the state require to have a fire chief and a police chief? And my question really is, because I know they do, is couldn't the city administrator look over those two positions, or the mayor, or a city council committee to look over those two to get rid of your director's job since you only have 3 days left? And then to follow up with that again yet, I know that Waterloo tried for a little while. They had Dan Trelka, while he was the police chief, overlook the fire department because I guess there was a few issues there, and I'm not privy to what those were. And so he was in kind of that position for a little while as he had the police chief's position. Wouldn't it be a good idea for at that time to bring in somebody from outside for a little while to fill that spot temporarily till we figure out what we can do? That's kind of like 4 questions. But.
For the public safety or for the director position?
Right, for Director Olson's position.
Yeah, it's not, I can answer, it's not possible to do that under our city code, only as an interim, if you're talking about.
Right, that's what I'm talking about, and I wanted to know what his opinion was on that, since he had so many years of service. I kind of am interested in his opinion.
Sure.
Okay. Well, so I think it's important, if we're doing an interim position, that would be someone internal, because they know the history, they know the operation. If you brought someone in from the outside just temporarily, there would be a big learning curve for them, and I don't know how useful that would be.
And I have to step in here. Our code doesn't allow it. So it's a moot point.
Yeah.
It says clearly in the city code that the interim public safety director is appointed by the administrator. I looked because I wanted to see if it's something I could appoint. It's appointed in code by the administrator, and the administrator can only appoint the existing police chief or fire chief into that interim position. So we don't even have the option to discuss this, unless council wants to change the code, which it certainly can.
My only thing is, Fairway's done a tremendous business, and I always look at businesses who are profitable. They always have their assistant managers work under 5 different managers so that when they do get their own store, they can have a blend of all those different things. I'd just like to see something come in from the outside to give a little different blend to all these things. That's the only thing I was trying to promote there. And again, thanks for your service to the city.
So my questions are, I'm not sure, other than continuing to discuss, I'm not sure what we're trying to accomplish. At some point, I think it's about 75% of our registered voters in our community didn't vote. What that shows me, you can take that lots of different ways, but what that shows me is contentment. We are here to serve the majority of citizens in Cedar Falls, regardless of who they voted for or how they will vote. At some point, we need to recognize what this continued discussion is going to cost our community. If we aren't getting people to apply, if we aren't getting people to stay, if we're getting turnover, we risk safety, we risk rising costs. A third-party review, I don't mean to bring that back up, but, I'm a pretty big proponent of consultants when there's a reason for it. I haven't found a reason other than hearsay that's been put out on social media or from disgruntled former employees. I have not heard reasons to continue this discussion. Again, I want to make sure it's said, I would love to end this discussion tonight. I would sit here, I don't want to be here, but I'd sit here till midnight if we could just get this done. We keep messing with not only our employees, who, by the way, there's 74 people under Director Olson, is that correct? 74 employees, the largest department is it the largest department? Okay, it's pretty big, right? And it's 44% of our budget, so is that the largest part of our budget for departments?
In the general fund, yes.
Okay, so pretty important to have good management at the top, especially when you're dealing with a job, especially when you look at the policing side, that is incredibly stressful and getting more stressful by the day because of a broken mental health system, because people aren't going into public safety or policing. At what point do we stop this discussion? At some point, even if we campaigned on something, we need to understand that it's okay to learn, and it's okay to move on, and it's okay to, what I would like to see, as it was, again, discussed at goal setting, was to take this special report, which, bravo, I think we've all heard that it's a great special report, and turn that into, maybe an operational model for public safety. And how are we going to hit those metrics? What needs to be improved upon? But at least then we're moving forward. At least then we can say, yes, employees, you're safe. Yes, director position, you're important, and we recognize that, and it's time to move on. I will never try to squash discussion, but this council has a habit of over-talking stuff, and at some point, we got to make a move or have a good reason to be talking about it. So I feel like we don't have a good reason, and if I'm wrong, please tell me.
I get it. It's a tough conversation to have. The answer is we've already said we're going to talk about it again in 6 months.
Well, I think what we wanted to talk about in 6 months was maybe the goals on that report, that the special report that the department wrote, was maybe just a follow-up of how are they doing toward their goals. Do they need to add any new goals? Is there any changes they want to make? They could do that every month in the monthly report, but I think we were looking at maybe 6 months doing that with the new director could have some time to work with the department, but then to follow up with the goals just to let us know how are they doing. Is there things that need to be changed as far as the goals I'm talking?
And can I say something to that? Since we've I agree, we talked about the 6-month thing, but I think since then, obviously we have a delay now in whatever's going to happen with the director position. If we decide that's the route we go, I'm thinking that could we let this department settle in a little bit? Can we let them go back to normal without us creating political controversy constantly, and then maybe give them a year's time to give us a report?
Yeah. You got to give them time to get their feet wet and get in there and look at the goals and work with it.
Yeah, we've been at, 2 years now? Would we say that that's how long the program's been implemented since the elimination of the firefighters? Is there anything else that you are anticipating changing? Or is the model set at this point?
I would say that really the model is set. One thing that we still have to work out or work on and finalize would probably be our public safety supervisors and the duration, the time that they're going to stay either on police and fire. We've already made some changes there with the new job classifications a few months ago that were approved by council. That's one thing that comes to mind. Another thing, we have a long ways to go in terms of social media and our message to the public messaging, and the city took a step forward when they hired a PIO a couple of years ago. That's probably something that's going to be in the future for public safety, is doing better in that area. And then I would say too, the special report, is very comprehensive. There's a lot of goals in there, and there's a lot of work to do in that special report. So it's definitely good for 5 years. I could see us adding a few things in that special report, but not much, because, the mayor was part of creating that, and there's a lot of work to do to try and achieve those goals that are in the special report. And we are working towards them.
So a lot of discussions that I heard throughout the last fall here and the summer was regarding training and a training matrix and really identifying where our strengths are, where our weaknesses are, and what our goals are. Along with that is the way our staff is promoted and what's the criteria for that. So I think that's something that we want to continue to, as a continuous improvement, as you will, to use Dustin's words, is that. But I'd like to get back to the number 5 so we could get that cleared off tonight. If we can, from what I have discussed with staff, what I've discussed with the citizens, the position is understandably important, and that the give and take, if we were to say, all right, now that position isn't going to exist any longer, how do we staff? It only makes sense to have the assistant chiefs on either side. So the point here that was made on this is $150,000 savings. I think that we're probably looking at the expense of over $200,000 if we had to create those other 2 positions. So I believe that the position is required, and I certainly agree. I think Ron has named Chief Birdie as the interim for at least 30 days, and we have the option to go for 6 months. Is that correct? So I'd like to settle that part of it right now or tonight and say, yeah, let's move forward with maintaining that position and proceed with advertising for it and get that job done, and then we can move on to these other points.
Okay. So,
Mayor, just one clarification there. So with the director's position, that acting position does not have a time limit. The police chief position would have, I have the ability to name a police chief for 30 days, and after that, it would be up to 6 months. The council could do that. That's a police chief. The director position doesn't have a time limit.
Okay. So have you named someone to back up the chief then?
On March 10th at 5 p.m., Craig Birdie will assume the acting director position, and he has not come forward with recommendation for an acting police chief yet.
okay. And just to be clear, like that's not an assumed finality. That it's just interim. Just to be clear.
Correct.
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, I've said this in components earlier, but looking at the numbers like I always do, lack of grievances and the 21,600 calls for service in the last year in all the departments with nothing large showing up as a problem, I think I'm very comfortable going ahead with what we're doing with public safety director position.
Yeah, and that sounds like that's a mirror of Gil.
Should we just call for
Sure.
consensus
Yeah.
on that?
Yeah, so for council, is there a consensus here that we would want to advertise for a public safety director position, given the continuance of a standalone public safety director?
Yes.
Is there consensus for that?
Yes.
So 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's a consensus there. So that addresses that question.
Mr. Mayor, so I think Councilman Cruz earlier said this, but I just kind of want to point this out. The 1 through 4, and I'm asking because I don't know for sure, but would those require a civil service or union agreement? Would restore the firefighter job classification, adopt professional specific physical fitness standards, which I think that one was crossed off if I saw it correctly in the packet. So that one's not one. Reprogram the public safety officer job from a job class to a biennial certification, and then end the public safety supervisor job class. I'm just asking, would those require some kind of an agreement with the union or civil service?
I'll jump in here for this one. So for number one, restore the firefighter job classification, there's no need to do that because that never left. It's still in the books.
Okay.
There's nobody in the position right now,
Sure.
but it's still in the books. And there are other positions within the city that still in the job class book, but there's nobody operating in that. So we can dispose of that one right here and right now.
So if we wanted to have a certified list created for firefighters, we could do so tomorrow?
We could, if we wanted to fill that list, we could create a civil service list for the firefighter position.
I thought council in February of 2020 decided to
Yes.
get rid of that job classification, and we've then brought forward an ordinance to get rid of that.
Yes, Simon, I agree.
What council did at the time was to vote to fully implement the public safety model. And as part of that, the current firefighters, full-time firefighters were laid off, but there was no separate action by council to eliminate the job classification. Council could have and still can if it wishes to, but it's still on the books.
Simon, I remember that as well. It was in the meeting in the Duke Room, and they said, we will no longer have a firefighter classification.
That's
And I
not,
remember it specifically.
that's not what happened.
So maybe that's what was said, if legally the action wasn't taken out, then.
Wasn't that what you remember too, Simon? And Mr.
Well-
Mayor, weren't you there too?
I thought that's what we said, but
I did
I'm
too.
not doubting that legally or what we did with ordinances is what Kevin said.
Right.
I was always under the assumption in the last 2 years that we had no firefighter job class anymore, that's what we were eliminating.
It still exists. The police officer position still exists. There's a couple other public safety positions that are on the books that still exist, nobody in them. So,
Great, so number one's done, thank you.
So
Yes.
there was a,
but I don't want to mislead the council in saying that now we're going to hire several firefighters and advertise and create a civil service list, because as Councilmember Dunn raised the issue, it's difficult to say without specifics here, but certainly 3, 4, especially, perhaps 5, we would be dealing with collective bargaining agreements and civil service requirements. And so if council would get to specifics on that, we would have to really drill down and study that a lot more to see if it's doable, and if it is doable, how best to do it. Or if it's not doable, if council decides to do something like that, how can we get the equivalent of that accomplished? So these general parameters are one thing, but when you really drill down and see what you really got to do to implement this, we would really have to go through, check with the labor attorney and see if those things are even doable. You have things like incumbency for current people in place, and so there are a lot of issues here when you're talking about, for instance, eliminating the public safety officer position, which is in the collective bargaining agreement. So,
Well, if you eliminated it though, just, isn't it the same as eliminating the firefighters?
they
How is it
could.
different?
The difference is we didn't eliminate the firefighter job classification, so you'd be saying to lay off public safety officers.
Okay,
Well, just to be clear, we don't want to lay off
Right.
public safety officers.
Correct.
Well, to that point, this says eliminate the public safety officer position. An employee can only serve in one job classification. So if that job classification isn't there, that employee would have to move to a different job classification. That's one of many, many civil service and labor issues that we'd have to work through. I'm not saying it's impossible. We'd have to look it over and advise best way forward to the council.
One more thing. I think we got some numbers that were sent out because I think Councilman Ganfield asked for some specifics and we got some numbers. Do we know what, if we went through with what those numbers, if we changed, do we know what that would cost the average, how we know, what would that add for taxes? Do we know or have an idea of what that would cost the individual taxpayer or homeowner in Cedar Falls?
Well, I think our problem's going to be is that if you would go back and the numbers are used that was presented last time, in other words, needing more firefighters, no police officers, more police officers, the problem's going to be that you don't have enough room in your $8.10 levy. That's where the problem's going to lie is, so what an effect on a homeowner, I don't want to say it was a moot point. Our problem's going to be is where we can even afford to do it because we are capped at the $8.10 levy and we don't have that much capacity in our $8.10 levy right now.
So what we're saying is when we say to get what, because right now we're talking about getting to the same level of service that we are right now as far as response times to emergencies. So to get to that, it's what you just said. We couldn't even, wouldn't even be possible with the $8.10 levy.
Correct, because we don't have that much capacity. If it is, truly that, I kind of gave that range of, if it's a $2.4 million cost, $3 million cost, again, we don't have that much capacity in our $8.10 levy right now.
Sure.
Okay. Now I'm looking at the clock now as well. We're at 6:50 or 6:25, so I will allow like some closing thoughts here. I hadn't heard from you yet, Dustin. Anything you wanted to add?
I've thought through a lot of information the last couple months. It's quite like drinking from a fire hose, no pun intended. But I agree with Simon. I think it would behoove us to have an external audit, and it's not a solution in search of a problem. I believe the problem there is, as he referenced, there's been a breach of trust in some measure because of some of the politicking that's gone on, some of the things, the misinformation that have been spread from whatever party. I've talked to intelligent individuals on both sides of this issue, and I see their perceptions and I see how they got to them. I believe the truth is somewhere in the middle on some of the issues. I only reference that because I don't intend to rehash what's happened in the past with this external audit of sorts. I would rather see an assessment with much more granularity than the ISO provides. Also, I actually spoke at length with Director Olson. I just wanted to thank you again for your years of service. I also owe you a public apology. I did not choose my words carefully last meeting, so I'm sorry for that. And I did not intend to impugn your reputation. So I know we've spoken, you have accepted my apology for that, but I want to make sure I mention that. You referenced in a conversation that the ISO may not analyze emergency response medical calls. Is that correct or not correct?
That is correct. It is not.
Okay. So there's a comprehensive look. And when I campaigned, to be frank, I said I personally am for experts in each field, including emergency response, medical response. And I think that's something that we could look at from an outside perspective. So to have an outside entity, I don't think is as harmful as some people are saying it would be. The intent is that we can say to our public safety officers, you are secure here in Cedar Falls. We're not pulling the rug out from under people. We're assessing and we're evaluating our best way forward. And frankly, there's some distrust for the mouthpieces that have given some information. Really appreciative of the data that analyzed our last 2 years. And I think that answered a lot of questions for me as I've done a ton of my own homework and research. But I still think it would be helpful to have an outside entity also say, here's the way, excuse me, here's the way forward, and we can get behind that. I've actually personally talked to a few people that have said that's all we've wanted. And that's what I wanted from 2018 on, is a public understanding of where we're at. And so if we can, as Councilman Harding has said, get together on this and get a council consensus after finding, yes, this is the right way forward, or yes, this is the way to tweak it for the best, that would be a good compromise in my mind. There may be a little bit of a collateral impact of having that discussion continue for a while, but I would be on board with a consensus of having an external audit so that we can get everybody back on the same page and go forward with Cedar Falls excellence in the whole community and represent all citizens.
So to that, I'm sorry, who's the neutral? Neutrality is my biggest concern. So who is this neutral third-party reviewer? And I just, like, it's got to be neutral.
Yeah.
Does that exist? And
no,
who?
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
You can't, we're not looking for, I mean, I'm not looking for someone like to come in that's completely biased one way or the other. I agree. I would want to look at, is there someone, I mean, that's the step one. Is there someone out there that's actually neutral that can say what we're doing is a creative, good thing, And maybe the answer is no. But maybe
Right.
there is someone out there that can look at it and say, here's what you're doing well and what you're not doing well, if there is anything. Again, it does go to that, for me, and again, it surpasses public safety and goes to this place of trying to rebuild trust and letting people know that we're willing to step up and look at things. Like with the zoning thing, I feel like we're trying to relook at things and send it back and do things. I feel like for some reason the public safety thing has just been a wall since day one, and I don't know why. And I don't want to rehash the past either. I'm with Dustin. So anyway, that's I don't need to harp on and on about it, but I agree with you. If we have someone come in, it has to be a neutral party.
And I guess, again,
Why?
I say this, we have to learn where we're getting our info. So a small vocal minority, and that's my interpretation, but is that reflective of our community? Is this reflective of needing to use our city resources, money, staff time, which turns into money? Is that worth bringing in somebody? And I don't understand what we're trying to get to. And then the other thing is are we going to get a report? If we get a report that says we're great, is that going to satisfy those folks? Are we going to keep going? Like, are some people
What
just
if we get a
never
report that
satisfied?
says we need 90 firefighters and
Right. I don't. I
75
just.
police?
I'm treading lightly, and again, I'm not anti-consultants. I mean, I trust. I love an expert's opinion, but we've got experts right here. A lot of our problems, I think, have been managed. Like the reports from people, they've been complaints about management. That's an internal discussion. That's for these folks to take care of. I feel like sometimes we're meddling in things that we don't need to be meddling in. There's not been a proof that we're not safe. In fact, it's gone on, and I don't know, what is the proof that we're not safe? And I don't want to open that can of worms again, but those are my thoughts, is at what point do we move on? And know that we're going to have, if we come to the consensus, know we're going to work towards the goals of the special report and continue to improve and be great and become greater. I just, at some point, we got to move on. And I just worry about an actual neutral entity.
Susan?
I just wanted to say that I've gotten a lot of emails, Kelly, in support of the public safety officers, in support of our department, and I've gotten a lot of emails, and I wanted to, you'd mentioned emails, and when you talk about this review, it's going to have a cost. We just talked about budget and where to cut. You've got to figure out, well, what's that cost, and what are you going to cut out of the budget to pay for this review that you really, I don't think it's needed, but you're going to have to cut something else out of the budget if you want to do it.
And Daryl, did you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I guess I just want to reiterate, looking at the numbers, 21,600 calls for service. And did we have 1% went bad, 0.5%? What's the magic number or the bad number that Simon or Dustin, you are thinking we need to evaluate because we're not doing well? I would like a little more clarity on the medical response, EMT, paramedic, ambulance through the hospitals, how that maybe evolved over the years so that the public feels safe to know that they'll have an ambulance responding from where. And I remember when I first got on council, I thought they said there was like 8 or 10 ambulances within the Cedar Valley area, even though we maybe talk about 1 or 2, and some people think there's only 1 or 2. But can you elaborate on that?
We're not going to have time for that tonight.
I'd like to extend. We're right at the cusp of a good question here, I think.
We're at the start of about a half-hour conversation.
Well, we can be here till midnight, I think, is what I heard somebody say.
What you're saying is a good question. I agree. But again, that's something that could be looked at. You just said that Dustin and I think we're not doing well. I never once this entire time.
I didn't say that. I mean, but
Okay, well, I interpreted, my apologies, that you meant that we say we're not doing well and we're looking for what we're not doing. Again, I'm going to say it. I haven't seen an issue. You're right. I think we're doing well. I want to look at it and look at the data, and we could include the EMS, and that's what I'm saying. More comprehensive. Build trust. Get the, to me, it goes to that trust thing and bringing more people in. We're never going to make everybody happy. I realize that. But there are certain things we could do to bring more people along and to look at making the best program for Cedar Falls. It's hard for me to hit the button and fully get behind it because I have to make that decision. And
Well, I'd still like, we're here till midnight, as someone said. I'm happy to give another 5 minutes to Mr. Boswick if he wants to elaborate on the EMT, hospital, ambulance, because that's a key component of this thing that we really haven't spent a lot of time on.
And we're not going to tonight.
I think with council's opinion
Unless
here,
council wants to talk for
another 5 minutes.
half hour.
Any problem with that to hear?
I'll give it 5 minutes, but I'm cutting it off at 5 minutes.
That's fine.
Okay. John, floor's yours.
Boy, I'll speak quick. Okay, so for the past, when I came on, we had the ambulance. We got rid of it, gave it back to Sartori Hospital. They provided a paramedic service. We have a contract with Sartori to provide paramedic service to our community. They have 2 ambulances here in town, and they are the primary EMS providers through paramedic service to the cities of Cedar Falls. They have 2 ambulances here in Cedar Falls. They also have an additional 2 ambulances at Mercy One in Waterloo. And I guess I should be calling them Mercy One. I apologize for that. We back them up on major medical calls, but we are not the primary EMS provider in the city of Cedar Falls.
Say that again, we're not the primary
fire
what?
department is not.
We are not the
PSO.
primary medical, emergency medical service provider in Cedar Falls. That is Mercy One.
Okay.
And we just assist them. I'm trying
we-
to
do
do
we-
as fast as I can.
Do we direct them on where to, because I'm still
Okay.
in the thought of service for North Cedar. And if that would include staging an ambulance out there, that'd be a start. So do we direct them on where to stage?
We do not. They use their calls for service and that type of stuff as directives for where their ambulances are provided. And right now, they have one in the industrial park at a facility in the industrial park, and they have one at what used to be Sartori Hospital, which is Mercy One.
And I'm just going to add one thing to that. So we have 2 ambulances, paramedic level, that transport in Cedar Falls. If both of those are busy, Chief Boswick mentioned that there were 2 over in Waterloo. As soon as those 2 in Cedar Falls are busy, one of those in Waterloo starts driving towards Cedar Falls. So if there's a 3rd medical call that comes in, we have another rig available. And then there's a 4th rig that can come over if that occurs. And if there's ever a situation where all 4 of those are busy, we have Waterloo. We also have care ambulance. And I shouldn't say we, but Mercy One is assisted Waterloo. Waterloo is assisted Mercy One. Care ambulance is assisted as well. So it's a teamwork between the 3 ambulance services, but our primary is Mercy One, and it seems to work fairly well for us.
And I guess I should say, I was trying to do it super fast, so I apologize. For
you did pretty well.
You
Short.
got 3 more minutes.
Yeah, you
we
did
do?
well.
Well, I got a lot more to say. Mercy One also provides paramedic service for some of the outlying areas, including Janesville, New Hartford, Parkersburg, and those types of places that do not have paramedic service, and typically throughout the day they may not even have an ambulance that's available. So they provide that service also.
All right, so as we kind of close up here, I think we would be looking for that consensus of the external review. That's what Simon and Dustin had brought up. So I'll ask, would the council consent to pursuing an external review of the department, which of course would have a cost, but to have an outside group look at our department in the months ahead?
What's the time frame? We got to define the time frame. 6 months?
Well, you would have to first make sure you could find an entity that is,
6 months would
Control.
cover
Say notionally, yes.
finding.
What would you kind of putting the consensus part on hold, would your preference be to have it happen much faster or much later? Do you
I'm
care if it's 6
confident
months or
with
a
what we've
year?
got going here, so, but to appease the concerns of some of the public, we can look at that.
Okay, so
But,
I think
so
6 months is probably,
We got to look at the budgetary component of that as well, which we'll talk about right quick here.
Aren't we first just asking if there's a consensus to even do the review? And
even
then we
look-
can worry about what the
to-
time frame is?
Yes, to even looking at doing
Okay.
a review.
I think we should start with that.
okay. So consensus to have an external review, period.
No.
See a
No.
no,
Yes.
Yes.
yes, here, no. So it's 1 on this side. And then
Yes.
2, 3,
It's going to largely depend on who does the audit, because a lot of it is like asking the waiter if the steak is any good. So that's kind of my issue. It would have to truly be an outside entity, and I don't know where we would find something that fair and square that we'd all agree on.
Yeah.
That's what would have to happen first. We'd all have to
I-
agree on what it is.
Yes,
And
I agree.
who it is before, otherwise it's just a waste of time and a waste of money.
Yes.
Well,
I agree
so
with that.
so what the consensus would be tonight isn't voting to sign, like, put forward a contract. It's just, do you want staff to bring forward a couple of potential companies for us to look at and what some prices?
Wouldn't we do that through a referral process at the end of the council meeting
That's an option.
and discuss it
that's-
there?
Well, yeah, because I guess it is staff
That's-
Because
direction.
right now, we're looking at,
That's the problem.
I believe, the
It
status
has
quo.
to be council direction. It has to be one of us that really comes up with somebody fair.
Well, what they're
That's
talking
what
about
I
here, though,
believe.
is the vote forward to do it. They want to have as a part of a referral, so that way there's a vote and it's formal, because we would be directing staff to research or to find us companies, or bring your own. I've got 2 in mind myself that I'll have staff
If
consider.
we all move that discussion forward and find something that's agreeable with all of us, that's how it would have to start.
With the majority is all we could do.
Exactly.
Okay, so you'd be okay with that then, Dave? At least
I am, as long as it's a very unbiased by real professionals who really know what's going on. That's where it's going to be
Oh, sure,
troublesome.
sure. Okay, so I do see that as a consensus, but to the point of, I think it's Daryl had mentioned, should that be a referral? It's up to you for council to decide. I think we know enough to have them move
That's a-
forward. Do you need the formality of a referral?
That's the question for Mr. Rogers. What are your thoughts from a legal standpoint? Should that be brought forward as a referral, or is consensus to look at some companies from a work session enough?
The second part. Staff understands what council's wishes are and wishes are. We can proceed on that.
Okay. So no referral necessary. Thanks.
And at what point do you have to determine what the cost is and how it would affect the budget, or what would need to be removed from the budget, since we're having that meeting tonight?
We don't have any idea what it'll cost.
Right.
We don't. So we would have to talk about that. First, you got to find someone that we even agree on before we
Well,
even.
The estimate I got, I've done a little checking into it, would be between 50 and 100,000.
it's a pretty big swing.
I understand.
So,
That's why I'm just in favor of separate police and fire. Save us that.
Well, I think that's part of the misconception on what we have. So I know we had the presentation last week, and we've talked about it a number of times, but when Bertie talks about 6 professional firefighters showed up at a call, we're talking about our PSOs that and I'm not certain a year is the correct assignment for that, but for that year that they're assigned, that's their full-time job. They're not driving around town in a patrol car and a call comes in and they've got to run out and then drive a fire truck. We got those folks. And if we were to split those magically today, the first place I'd want to look for our trained staff is those guys, those people we already have. And it's going to be the logical. We're invested in them, we've trained them, and we've got them prepared. So it's a matter of, semantics of saying they're separate. There's even people on both sides that I've talked to have said there is a benefit to having that cross-training.
Yeah,
And
because as soon as something happens, if you're at a crash scene and then something explodes and starts burning, you need the fire skills to take care of that and not have the police certified person step back and say, I don't know how to deal with that. So I think it's safer for everybody to have the cross training.
The two items I think we need to continue to look at on continuous improvement is that training, the training matrix. That's still something that there's concern, because if you looked at just strictly seniority, we've hired a lot of people since 2018, and they may have came in with fire experience, or they came in with police experience, but it was with cities our size, or was it a volunteer fire department, or where they came from. So I think that's where having that training matrix and an outside board look at our promotions would give some better confidence level in our activities there.
So, and at this point, because we could be looking at another meeting if we don't kind of resolve some stuff tonight, the two items that were remaining on that the PS22 plan was reprogram public safety officer from job class to biannual certification, and then end the public safety supervisor job classification. So with this audit in mind, there's this review, are those basically off the table now?
I mean, for me, it's hard to jump. I don't know if that's the way to go. I want to start where we're at. We're here. Let's look at it first before we make any decisions. And then I also learned today that we still have the firefighter job class. So that was on there. So no action necessary to reinstate that.
Okay.
So for me, I don't feel like we need to make a rash decision and jump to make it those two steps.
Okay. So yeah, and I had a goal of having them considered, and I really appreciate the council did look through them. There's a lot of emails, traffic back and forth, weighing pros and cons on it. So I'm grateful for that. I still will have them available for additional discussion, especially as part of this external review and audit. But I never come to anything without doubts of my own. And that is, I think, a healthy trait for someone. So I wanted to propose and provide the information and a space to talk about it. I'm grateful that it happened. There were a lot of conversations happening over the last couple of weeks in preparation for this. So I greatly appreciate that.
Well, Mr.
Next,
Mayor,
yeah, go ahead.
just a quick comment. Item number 3 on the PS22 report, much in line with what we said at the previous meeting on training and having somebody fail, but you can't fire them, basically. So in here, you're asking to have them demonstrate their current law enforcement, firefighting, rescue, and emergency medical procedures using a graded comprehensive pass-fail task guide, which needs to be developed. I mean,
We already took that out, didn't we?
well, that's item number 3.
Yeah, but
We just said we're not.
But from what Mr. Rogers has said at the previous meeting and others, that once a firefighter and a police officer is in the position, we can't give them a graded scale of pass, fail, and then
correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't that crossed out in the email saying that we were not?
That's number 2.
Number
I'm talking about
Number 2?
three.
Oh, sorry.
Read very poorly out of it.
My apologies.
Second paragraph of number 3 elaborates to the pass-fail task guide. So I don't think that's legally allowed. So item 3 to me would be stricken as well.
But we also just said that we were going to do that. We're taking, I guess we didn't have a consensus. I said that I'd be willing to take them off for now because we were going to do a review.
I think certifications are determined by the state anyway, not by the city. So
That's correct.
And I'll just say there's no easy answer to this, but I asked the chief for a copy of the Essentials of Firefighting book. There's a lot to it. And I just want to make sure that the officers are able to continually do this years after they've.
Certainly.
And how do we evaluate
That textbook there, I had that 4 years ago when I was running for election. That's the same book that the volunteer firemen study out of. paid firemen, PSOs, everybody, that's basic fire skills that everybody needs to know that's going to squirt water on a fire.
Can I say that I find it insulting to our staff when we continually question, we are not public safety people. What right is it for us to continuously question the people that do the job every day? I find it insulting, and I'm sure they do too. So we got to stop talking like this. We tear down our staff in public meetings.
So are we?
I'm not talking about any particular staff member.
But
Talking about the
what
program.
expertise, they're doing the job. So what, you said it though, and you said it in a public meeting, and they do the job, and they do it every day. And just,
Every officer does it every day?
every firefighter does it every day.
Okay.
To the point of we're almost done with that 5 minutes you gave us. I believe
This is a different topic.
I believe, well, okay. I believe we are moving forward with advertising for a public safety director. That's
Right.
the main thing that we have consensus on.
Right. And for the evaluation, moving forward with an evaluation.
But the prime thing is so we can have viable candidates and a process for Mr. Gaines and the city to go forward with. We have a consensus to move forward with that.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, what I heard tonight, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially it's status quo until we get the audit back?
That's what I'm gathering.
So we would continue with filling any of the positions that are open until after a consultant selected, it's paid for, the results come back, and the council decides if they want to implement any of those changes?
Would you just leave an interim director in the meantime until we see if we can get an audit? I mean,
No, that would mess up
Yeah,
the hiring process.
I thought the director, that's why I wanted to separate 5. I thought are you saying that you don't want to tell Ron to move forward?
well, with the interim director, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I'm okay with that. But advertising for
Well, my intent was, let's get that position filled. It
yeah, but there's a
makes
difference.
sense.
There's a difference between interim and advertising the position. Is what Daryl seemed to say was advertising for the position, right? Or am I
Correct, yeah.
wrong?
Correct.
Because that's the consensus that I'm starting to hear. Gil?
I thought that's what we
Consensus was to move
discussed.
forward with the appointment of the position, or going
The
through
interim
process.
position,
Interim
exactly.
and
No,
And to advertise,
and
advertise for a permanent.
to maintain
Yes,
the,
the only concern I would have is throw out there that while we have this external audit looming, so to speak, it might not behoove us to advertise externally until that is settled so that we get
Exactly.
the level best candidates. I think Administrator Gaines had shared that perspective that while there is some uncertainty, it's not the best time to fill that position. So I'm hoping way closer than 6 months that we can come back with some recommendations. And if we find an unbiased, agreeable audit source, that we can get that executed quickly and then be able to hire, go ahead and advertise.
this
But if
audit,
that's the
though-
consensus is that we hire now, I just note that there's a risk there.
This audit, though, is to show improvements or where we're doing good, efficiencies, where we're doing good, where we're doing poor in the department, not to undo the PSO. So why would we not go forward with the positions?
Because we don't know what they're going to come back with, quite frankly. That's the only reason. If they came back with a structural change that we needed to consider and moved that direction, it'd be a lot more.
There'd have to be some
Difficult to undo
glaring
some.
weaknesses, and I don't see any right now. I mean,
Yeah, I know, but that's why we're having an external audit, because we don't see them, because we have a bias in our perception. So when we have an external audit, it's not necessarily that neither Simon nor I are claiming there is dysfunction that we have to solve. I believe at least a large majority of the problem for me that we need to solve is the public perception. So that is the main reason. I'll throw out there an example here. If a citizen calls in and says, hey, I have a parking concern on my street, we're willing to expend city dollars to put together a traffic study so that we can figure out whether we need to satisfy that one caller about parking on their side of the street or both sides or otherwise. We've got a decent chunk of people that are still not happy, and an external audit provides that opportunity to say, hey, let's come together, see if it falls. Let's get past this.
It's not reflected in the last vote for council. Because in my ward, there was only 5%, I want to say, that voted essentially for getting the PSO program?
I think we could speculate the myriad reasons why persons are elected. I don't think we need to go on that. None of us are saying that we're unsafe. In fact, I would like to say I see a dozen public safety officers here, and I'd like to thank them.
I agree.
People in different roles, supervisory and otherwise. But you guys have my sincere thanks. You guys and gals have my sincere thanks. And I believe you should have confidence that we're here to do the best thing for our community, just like you. So we're more partnered than we are against you. I hope you hear that from us. Probably not easy to interpret, so let me just say it clearly. We are for our civil servants in all capacities, and we don't want to dismiss anyone. We just want to make sure that if there are areas of improvement, that we know them and we can get that information to the community in a transparent fashion.
Yep. And any new system has areas for improvement.
Can I ask, when we do a parking study, who does the parking study? Is it staff?
No.
Well, we've had both. We've had staff do a parking study, partnered with.
If there was concern about parking on the side of the street, like one or the other, who does that?
Typically, it's staff.
Okay. So we trust staff for some things, but we don't for others, and that's unfortunate.
Well, I'd still like to go back to the point, Mr. Gaines and staff, are you ready or feel like the consensus from what you've heard is to go forward with advertising, interviewing, and hiring a replacement for Mr. Olson on a permanent level?
Well, what I'm looking for is clear direction. I really need clear direction. I don't think it's fair to actually put out an acting position for what some people are trying to say is going to be 6 months, knowing just the hiring and selection process for getting a consultant selected for this audit. I doubt we're going to get somebody, RFPs, selection process, contract, and then an audit performed in 6 months.
Yeah, I would agree. It's
I
going to be closer to.
don't think it's there. I also think we're going to run into some other trouble as we start to go down line. We're looking at potentially an acting police chief, which we would only have 180 days, which is that 6 month time period. And then on down the line, acting captain, acting lieutenant. So really, I would request that we can move forward with appointing these positions in a permanent fashion.
Which was really what the vote was, the consensus was, is the way I understood it.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
I can
That's where the consensus is at.
I know
I can
that
go with it. It's fine.
Okay.
I misunderstood. I thought
All right. Well, I think that captures out the items that we had for concern that we can't address tonight. So we still need to have a committee of the whole this evening. Is that an option to delay that to get into our regular meeting, or do we need to have that as an informational?
I think at some point we really, that's got to move forward.
Okay, we'll continue on with that.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to continue forward with that.
The I&I discussion.
Yeah, we've delayed for other things. We've been here till 9 o'clock other times.
right.
We can take a bathroom break if needed.
take like 5 minutes and.
Great. Yeah, so we will adjourn this meeting, this work session, and then take us over to about 7:02, 7:03 for our committee of the whole. If you're joining us for the regular meeting, that will we'll look to kick that off about 7:20, 7:25. We'll see how quickly we can get through I&I.
And I too wanted to thank all the public safety officers for their service. We really appreciate everything you do.
Absolutely.
Yep.